Good morning. Actually, Valerie Boeing has been quite generous to allow us to try something different. So we're actually going to do a talk show, and she's our producer. And so she graciously allowed me to be the host. And create mugs. So we're going to do the Today Show. So this is D-Farm Today. So welcome as we're going to do this talk show. And I have absolutely 3 fabulous guests that we're going to actually meet with today. And the topic for today's show is actually going to be about making clinical research available to all patients and trying to incorporate it into healthcare. And this is an excellent topic that we're going to actually talk about today, and hopefully it will be a series that we can actually bring to you. Because as you're probably well aware, this is probably what we experience with clinical research. It's very difficult for patients to get into clinical research, and even they're not aware of it, and it's difficult for them to find clinical research. But what we've learned is when they actually participate in clinical research, they generally have a great experience. And often, the care they get through that particular experience helps them actually have greater outcomes. And they actually are able to treat their disease better and actually learn a lot about their given disease. And actually that's demonstrated over here, which is what we want out of the healthcare system. We actually want people to have better experiences, we want to decrease cost, and we want to be able to improve the health of patients. Isn't that why most of us are in the pharmaceutical industry to begin with? Why we work for CROs? Why we want to innovate? Isn't that why we're here? We want to improve the life of humanity. So the government's invested a lot of money to try and make that better. Hasn't been an easy haul. And then we know that clinical research is a way in order to make it better. So let's figure out how to make that happen. Let's figure out whether or not this is true. Is it real? Can we actually make clinical trials a care option for patients? Does it matter? Let's see what our guests have to say. All right, so let's introduce our first guest, the fabulous Jennifer Byrne from the world-class site management organization, PMG Research. Jennifer, so nice for you to be here with us today.
Great to be here, Kathy. Thank you so much.
How was your trip to Boston?
It was fantastic.
Awesome.
It was fantastic. Actually, just riding down the elevator, I have to tell you. I rode down the elevator with another group of people here for a conference, a 40-something thousand patient conference, I'm sorry, not patient conference, but conference. And we started talking about what conference I was attending, the conference they were attending. We started talking about clinical research. And to your point, somebody in the elevator said, I know about clinical research, we just don't know how to get into clinical research. So it was telling.
Very true.
Very true. Yeah.
So what do you think about this, making clinical research a care option for patients? Do you think that's possible? Do you think it's feasible?
I think we're doing it. I think we're doing it. I think we're doing it, yeah. We're going to hear more in terms of how we're doing that. Really excited. We have a breath of fresh air that'll be joining us, and that's Jeff James. And I think that he's going to be giving us some really great insights in terms of how we're doing that.
Okay, great. So what do you think what do you think we need to do to make that possible?
Well, I have to tell you, being a long-time veteran in the clinical trial space, a good lesson learned for me was stepping out, having an opportunity to step out. And a couple of years ago, a really good friend of mine, who's actually the chairman of the board of a large healthcare system based in the Southeast, said to me, he said, you know, I came across a great article, and he said, I think you should read it. And so he directed me to this article, and I would encourage all of you to look into this article. So it was entitled The Strategy That Will Fix Healthcare. It was written by the esteemed Michael Porter from Harvard, and Thomas Lee, who's the chief medical officer of the advisory board, and Press Ganey. And so in this article, it was amazing. I mean, it's the strategy that will fix healthcare. How could we not be interested in that? Right. But in this article, there was not one mention about clinical trials. And as a longtime site-facing person, having the opportunity to deliver the clinical trials experience to tens of thousands of people over the years, working with great physicians who, despite sometimes, I think, collective thought, that people are doing research for financial gain or other reasons, really have seen in our experience that physicians are trying to improve lives, make the world a better place. But it was really profound to me that in this article there was really no mention in terms of clinical trials. I'm happy to say that actually today here in the audience we have guests from Professor Porter's team. His healthcare team is actually here. So we're really hoping that we're able to continue the dialogue on a much larger scale.
Awesome. Great. Now, I'm trying to move the slides forward. It's not working. Awesome. Okay. Great, thank you.
So where I really want to focus, and we've spent a lot of time really talking about, we have an unsustainable model from the pharma side, clinical research participation is low. I think what I'm really passionate about in driving the message is how we better can build bridges and create shared value. And so if you think about it, what I'd really like to kind of focus on in my few minutes here is talking about really how the healthcare landscape is changing. And because of these changes in healthcare, I think it's driving an enormous opportunity for us to bring clinical research to the lives of more. So the business model, if you think about it for physicians, is dramatically changing.
Absolutely.
Physicians are no longer independent operators. More and more they're becoming part of large healthcare networks.
Yes.
The influence from a regulatory standpoint, the influence in terms of the technology. So a lot of pressures are coming about physicians, and in turn, a lot of pressure is coming on administrators in trying to find better value drivers to enhancing the care experience. So I think where all of this is leading us is that as an industry, we've been very, very focused on the physician. I think what we've left out is the leadership.
Right.
And in the first session yesterday, we were talking about, kind of getting to the top of an organization. So I think there's an opportunity for us to be reframing the value proposition of clinical research to those points that you've already mentioned as far as the triple aim. And again, we will hear more from Jeff about that in a few minutes.
A big insight for me last year is I was trying to learn about what the hurdles were about bringing research into patient care was RVUs. And I learned in talking to some physicians is that if they actually do research, the RVU value is 0. And if you actually get measured against RVUs, and your RVU score needs to be high, and if you do research and you get an RVU score for 0 for doing research, that's a problem.
It's a huge blocker. The financial compensation model is a huge blocker. We actually have done some time and motion studies within PMG, and we have had some healthcare provider relationships that we've had, and to that very point, getting any traction within clinical research, that becomes the blocker, because really, if you look at the total time that a physician spends with respect to a trial, the training in terms of EDC, the regulations, the protocol itself, investigator meeting, all of those things, coupled with the actual time with patients. Actual time with patients really only represents about 15%.
Right.
So in an RVU system, they're only being recognized and rewarded within their system for 15%.
Yeah. And so you can't, you have to have a patient, you have to have a doctor, you have to have both of them together in order to have a clinical trial. Can't get recognized for it. Leadership doesn't support it. It's hard to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing your views on that.
Thank you.
I'd like to hear the leadership side. Well, let's see what leadership has to say for that. Let's see if we can get that. What's the opinion on what leadership has to say? So let's hear from a leader. Let's hear from Mr. Jeff James, who's the head of Wilmington Health in North Carolina. Welcome. Thank you. Good to see you. What do you think of the city of Boston?
I love Boston.
Have you been here before?
I have a few times, actually.
What do you think of this Disruptive Innovation Conference? Is this new for you?
It is new. It's only the second or so pharma-type conference I've been to, and first of all, I noticed that everybody dresses just a little more casually than we do at my conferences.
Yes. You got a tie. It's quite nice.
Oh, thank you.
I like that. It's very sweet. Yeah. Awesome. It's, ooh.
And that's a little different, too.
So what do you think about this conference? How's it landed on you?
I like it. I think it's interesting. It's one of the first times that I get to see another faction of the healthcare delivery system trying to do some of the same things that we're trying to do. We think of ourselves in the provider space as the mainstream of medicine, but there are so many more components. And for us to be successful in the future, what we're going to have to recognize is we have to disrupt what we've done. It's got to be different. We have to be able to bring organizations with different temperaments, talents, and convictions together in ways that produce dramatic improvements in quality and performance. And this kind of conference is a step in the right direction. What I'd really like to see is some of the other players from healthcare at this conference, and some of the players from this conference at their conferences. Because until we can do that, I don't think that we're going to really figure out what the innovations can be.
Okay. So what conference should we go to?
Oh, there's tons of them. I mean, we could talk about that later, but
Okay.
GPIN, AMGA, all of those are provider-facing conferences.
So we could talk about that and figure out how we could collaborate and maybe get there. And we could talk to some of our chairs and see what we might be able to do.
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay. So what about this leadership challenge that Jennifer posed and getting clinical research as part of a healthcare system and making it available to patients?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So I've been doing what I do now for 20 years, which is large group practice administration. And honestly, I thought of research as simply an annoying hobby that some of the practitioners in my practices engaged in. It didn't seem to be, it seemed to be remarkably time-consuming, remarkably resource-intensive, and not particularly financially beneficial. And it wasn't until a few years ago when I met Jennifer and we started having conversations, and then we had a forward-thinking physician who suggested that I look at things a little bit differently. Yesterday when I came in from the airport, right when I walked in, it was right in the middle of Jeffrey Kasher's panel discussion, and I heard the word ACO and my ears popped up. I was in the back of the room, and I couldn't even see who was saying it, but I heard the word ACO. And well, first of all, how many in the room know what an ACO is? Okay, that's pretty good, about half or so. Okay, so for those that don't, an ACO is an accountable care organization, and is based on three main principles. And the three main principles come from the Triple Aim, which was a relatively famous paper written by Don Berwick in 2007. And it says that in order to be successful in the future, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to improve the care of the populations we serve, and that could be based on any number of criteria. We have to reduce the per capita cost of care, and we have to improve the patient experience. And we at Wilmington Health are an accountable care organization. We were admitted as an accountable care organization in 2013 and have received a fair amount of success in that area. And one of my forward-thinking physicians came to me, actually the medical director for PMG, and said, we need to be looking at clinical research through the lens of an accountable care organization. And so we did. And once we started doing that, the light bulb came on for me in a way that no other light bulb has. Maybe only a few light bulbs for me, but it really changed the way I thought about clinical research. And I really believe that clinical research is definitely going to be one of those solutions, one of those countermeasures that help us do those things, that help us reduce the cost curve, that help us improve that experience and that help us improve the health of the populations we serve. And so we started studying it in our ACO. Is that working?
Yep.
Can I run my own show?
Absolutely.
Thanks. So we...
Yes.
Thank you. She knew what I was going to ask because she said I was going to have to sit down, and I can't really sit down and talk. I don't like to do it. Okay, so we started taking a look at this data much differently than we ever had before. And what we wanted to try to do is tie together the three triple aim concepts, what I call our triple aim aspiration. And we took one study and we looked at it through the lens of patient satisfaction or patient engagement. Now, this graph up here is a little bit busy, but what it illustrates is all of the questions from our standard patient satisfaction survey. And each one of those bars, the one that's highlighted there is the one that illustrates the overall question, the overall performance. So the first bar, this purple bar on the left, illustrates the national average. The next bar illustrates Wilmington Health's overall average, so our patients are a little bit more satisfied than the rest. The next bar over and continuing to go up to the right illustrates our diabetic population. The next bar illustrates our diabetic population that participated in a diabetic study before they started participation. So what we see is that population is a little bit more satisfied than our overall diabetic population. And the next two bars are what happened, the red and the salmon color, are what happened after they started participating in clinical research. Although they were fairly satisfied before, clinical research took their level of satisfaction to a whole nother level. And that is remarkable and stunning, and I've never seen that in my 20 years from any particular countermeasure around patient satisfaction. Okay, as far as the patient experience goes, one of the things that PMG did was they worked with the advisory board to modify our standard satisfaction survey and added a couple of questions. And so they asked additional questions. Has participation in clinical research improved your interest and involvement in your overall healthcare? The bars represent two different periods where those questions were asked. And the first time it was 95%, and the second time 100% said that it had. Has adding clinical research impacted the overall quality of care that you now receive? And on a 5-point Likert scale, it was about 4.75. So that's a big deal for us because it helps illustrate the level of patient engagement. And patient engagement is one of the most difficult things to achieve because if the patients are engaged in their own health care, it's more likely that they're going to have better outcomes. And then here are some comments from the patients. Now, the first time I reviewed this study was the comments were what really riveted me. And the reason for that was I had never seen such positive, affirmative comments of all of the surveys that I've read. And I read every survey every quarter. And so here's just a sampling of some of the comments from the surveys. Now, let's get to the outcomes, triple aim. Okay, one of the things that we're trying to do is improve the health of populations. In this study, and this is the same study, it was a diabetic study, so the population of patients is our diabetics. There's actually two lines here, and they're almost right on top of each other. The blue line represents the study nationwide and its results. The red line is our results, and it deviates a little bit from the national study, but not much. And probably the reason for that is, the law of large numbers in our surveys a little bit small, or our studies a little bit smaller. But you can see that for the average A1C, we dropped it from 8.5 in visit 13 down to around 7.3 or so. It's pretty good. Definitely meets the criteria. We've improved the health of that population. Now let's talk about the cost. Okay, so another component of the triple aim is the cost of care. What does it cost? So we took a look at these same patients, and what we saw was before they entered the study, their cost of care was $1,100 per patient per month to the Medicare system. After they entered the study, that dropped down to $354 per patient per month. Rather remarkable, a rather remarkable decrease. Now, I know some of you are thinking out there, well, that just got transferred to pharma. And I know that you're thinking that because I've been told that many, many times as I've given this presentation. I'm going to comment on that in just a second. Okay, I'm going to move on to a different study. This is a cardio study. And what this represents is the blue line represents all of our patients that could have participated in the study. We have some fairly sophisticated analytical capabilities. We can mine our electronic medical record and our claims data to understand which patients could potentially meet the criteria. The blue line represents that. The red line represents those that participated in the study. And what we see is the red line, the ones that participated in the study actually started at a little bit higher level of compliance, but before they started in the study in 2013, in this point, before they were in the study, they were on a similar trend line as everybody else that didn't participate. However, once they started participating in the study, their in this case, blood pressure improved dramatically to 90.6% in control. This wasn't actually one of those areas where we thought that the drug was supposed to benefit. This is something else. This is just from participation in the study. Now, in this case, similar example, and we have 7 case studies of cost that show the exact same thing. So in this example, beforehand, it was almost $1,300 per patient per month, and after they started in the study, $475 per patient per month. It's pretty good reduction. Now, let's talk about this issue of transfer to pharma, right? Some of you were thinking that, I'm sure. We heard this for a number of months when we shared this information. And so yesterday I heard that Craig likes to be a little bit provocative, so I'll add some of that right here. My response to that at first was, what difference does it make? And I don't care. And what difference does it make is you got to do the studies anyway, right? They've got to be done. And so even if it's shifting to pharma, it didn't make a difference in the cost to pharma or the cost to anybody else. The I don't care is I have a contract, I have a relationship with the payer, and if it transferred to pharma and moved it off of my area of responsibility, and it looks like we're doing better and lowering the cost to the payer, whether that's Medicare or the commercials, that's good for my ACO. But nonetheless, we set out to figure this out, and we looked at this cardio study. And the first thing I did was looked at our cost information related to the outpatient side. And truthfully, I couldn't figure it out from the outpatient side. I expect that some of the data actually or some of the costs actually are being transferred to pharma. And there was just no way to figure it out because this is an outpatient study. But then I focused on inpatient. You see, this study didn't have anything to do with inpatient costs. It was all outpatient. And so for this study, $600 per patient per month on average was spent in inpatient. But after they started in the study, that number dropped down to $144 per month. And I have 18 months of data before and 18 months of data after they started. Now that money is gone from the system. That was not transferred to pharma. That is the benefit that pharma gave to the healthcare system. And you all ought to know that. And certainly it should be in your talking points. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Now let's hear a little bit more about from the pharma side. Is it actually saving money? Is it money transfer? What does that look like? What does pharma have to say? So we'd like to call Allen Buechler from Strategy and Operations from Lilly. Let's hear from you. Welcome. Friendly face. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Well, thank you for inviting me to your couch.
You're welcome. Great to don't get to work with you so much anymore, so it's good to see you.
Yes, this is a great opportunity, though. I've been collaborating with these two guys
Yeah.
for a good year and a half, and it's been an awesome opportunity, and I think we're making really good progress.
Excellent, excellent. So how have you liked the conference so far?
I've enjoyed it very much, honestly. You know, it was amazing to me that there are so many, it's a very complex problem.
Yeah.
Trying to improve clinical trials, and there are so many opportunities where we're all trying to advance that ball. I think bringing it all together is going to be a challenge, and I think it's something we should all respond to, so see what we can do.
What do you think about Jeff's word about transferring the cost and about saving money for pharma and in this innovation, and what do you think about that?
Well, we had a few conversations over the last year about this transfer of cost concept.
So being an old finance guy.
Yes, multiple years. You know, it truly was, from the pharma perspective, we understood what he was, you know, his position, and that the transfer of costs really didn't matter to an ACO, but we really wanted to make sure that we were trying to demonstrate that there's more benefit and a bigger benefit from clinical research. So we pushed on that conversation, and I'm really excited that he was able to, you know, parse his data a little bit further, and we really got a signal here that shows that there is probably some good upside to, you know, clinical research and what it does for the patient and the patient engagement and how that responds, I think, into savings. So it's really exciting. So
Can you
it's
talk
a
a
good
little
signal.
bit about how you tried to validate it? So did you believe Jeff at first?
Of course, I kind of.
Kinda?
You know, we just worked very closely together.
He didn't know I was going to ask him
Yeah, I
that.
didn't know that one. Jeff, it's been great. The data is really, I think, pretty compelling. The 18 months before and the 18 months after, and the fact that we looked at it from different angles, and then we finally got the signal when we looked at the inpatient, it made me really feel a little bit more comfortable. So I think, you know, it's still early. It's a couple trials and a single site. So, you know, it'd be great to continue to advance that conversation and support it further.
Okay. What else did you see when you looked at the data?
Well, you know, as part of this collaboration, one of the things as representing the sponsor of the trial, we wanted to see how did that model compare to other sites, and is there really a benefit from a sponsor's perspective? And you know, there's a challenge, and so we wanted to look at a couple. We did have an opportunity. We had one trial in which they participated in, where we were able to compare them to the other sites across North America. And we really found, we looked at 3 metrics: how fast they randomized, and we found that they were very consistent. The red bar in the charts, the first one is the randomization rate. They randomized about the same rate as the average of all of the sites we had on this particular trial. It was a large trial, and the average of all PMG sites. On the retention rate, you know, are they able to keep their patients in the study? That was very important. They actually are performing a little bit better, the PMG Wilmington model. It's essentially consistent, but there is a little tick. If you get really close to the chart, you can probably see a little bit of a difference. But where it was really quite surprising, I had hoped it would be different, but what really stepped up and really jumped out at us on the chart is their enrollment rate. They enrolled 4 times faster than the average site on a monthly basis. That actually put them in the top 5 of over 200 sites for this trial. Top 5 in terms of the speed which they enroll per month and the total number of patients they were able to deliver for the trial. So, you know, we heard a lot yesterday about how enrollment is a juggernaut, and it's really difficult, and we're trying, and it's important. This model, at least for this particular trial, the enrollment rate was exceptional, so it's really exciting to see.
Speaks to the leadership concept, right? If you believe in it, you focus on it, make it happen, you're all together.
I think that, you know, we tried, exactly right. We tried to kind of have a couple conversations about what do you think might be driving that. And care as an option certainly was the base of that, but the organization's really quite engaged. I think you saw that from Jeff's passion and commitment. and Jennifer, and how they really couple that with good support. They have that patient knowledge. We talked a lot about that in the past, so they're able to use records and so forth. And having an integrated network certainly doesn't hurt. So I think all of those things really contributed to that success.
Okay,
so it was good.
So again, taking you back to your money roots.
Yes. You know, as we started down on the path, we want to increase participation rate. We certainly want to speed trials to the market, both for the patient and for the sponsor. But we also saw, hey, there's probably an opportunity we can improve our efficiency and reduce our operating costs. And so we wanted to dig into that. So that was the second thing we looked at. And it was a bit of a challenge, but what we did was we modeled a couple of our trials and determined that if we could cut or reduce our timeline on a trial by at least a month, you could save about 1% of the costs, of the operating costs for every month you can reduce that trial. So if you see enrollment rates like that for this one site, if you're able to replicate that and eventually maybe shave a month or two off of a trial and hopefully more, that really saves a lot on those operating costs as far as having the samples in the site and supporting that site. And that's a true benefit for us as well, which helps us get some of those drugs off the shelf that we heard about yesterday that we can't get through the pipeline. So that was the other avenue. And you know, and the other thing, as we chatted, and that's probably, I'll wrap up, but I was really pleased. You know, I went into this exercise representing the sponsor and trying to see, you know, if there's benefit in increasing patient. But I was really shocked. It is positive for every fashion of the transaction. The patient, the sponsor, the provider, and the CRO. I mean, the engagement levels for the patient are up. Their outcomes are up. They have more options. You know, certainly sponsor has benefits. Providers, the ACO, really hits on a lot of their aspects as well. And as a CRO, you know, it's a real opportunity for to engage, start up sites quickly. You know, the other thing I kind of like about it is if you can sustain it and reproduce it, then when we do that next trial, site selection, you now have sites that are reliable and you can have good expectations from them. So it's really, I think, a positive.
Yeah, one of the things that I personally really, really believe, and hopefully people don't get sick of hearing me say this, is that we can't do clinical trials without patients. They're the most important human in clinical research because without them, we don't have our data. Without the data, we don't know if the drug is safe. We don't know if the drug is efficacious. And you need to get that patient together with a doctor, right? Because you can't take that patient through the clinical trial without the care of that doctor. And that doctor needs to be an investigator, and they need to go through that journey together. And to me, I think it's our responsibility that when a patient comes to see a doctor, that at least clinical research should be an option that is at least available. I'm not saying that every patient should go into clinical research, and I'm not saying that it is the right decision for every single patient to go into clinical research, but it should be an option. And maybe it goes out of the choices right away, but at least it should be an option. And I think it's exciting that Jeff, you're leading your organization to consider it. I think Jennifer, it's awesome that you have a premium organization that is helping to work with organizations like Jeff in order to make that possible, to turn that on, and you, Allen, as part of a sponsor, to partner with them in order to bring them studies and to show and work collectively together in order to demonstrate that this is actually good business. It's good business. It produces great outcomes. It's good for the patients. It's a good experience for them. It sounds like it's the right thing to do. It's good for healthcare. It's good for patients. And so I guess the question to the audience is like, how can we take these signals? How can we take this understanding, and how can we just make this so it's so? That like people understand this, and we can actually get more evidence and more fact, and we can prove this out, and it becomes the way it is. It shouldn't be a fight like it is. How do we figure out how to do that? That would probably be the call to action, that if you guys can help us or challenge us. So I'd like to probably turn it out to the floor, and do you have any questions to the guests? We have about 5 minutes if you'd like to ask our guests any questions. Andreas.
Really fascinating stuff. Congratulations. For me, the question is, in order to replicate or confirm these findings, how difficult is it to gather all these data and all these outcomes behind the scenes and put it on a slide? How much time did you have to spend on that? I think it should be thinking about how we do things internally in big pharma to collect metrics like that. It's awfully difficult, and I can't imagine it's more simple in a complex organization like an ACO.
Yeah. So the first time was a little tricky getting our data set up, but this is measured in hours, not days or weeks. We have all of the claims data, 100% of the claims data for every patient associated with our accountable care organization. It's provided by the plan sponsors. And so it's very easy for us to tag those individual patients. We have historical data on them, and then we have current data. So it's very easy for us to tag those specific patients that have participated in clinical research and every month run a report. What's their cost doing? We also have some analytical software that I referenced earlier that mines our electronic medical record, so we can put in various criteria for a study and pull out the population that could participate. And we can also then tag in that same system those same patients that do participate and run them as a separate cohort. So at first it was a little tricky to get it set up, and we needed to, it's like anything that's new, you kind of go through a knowledge-based phase of figuring it out, but now it's more of a skill-based set. And so for that diabetic population, anytime we want to run a report for that segment, since it's already established, it's, push the cost button and push the outcomes button and measure that against the potential of who could have been in. So it's really not very difficult anymore to do it.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, though, one additional kind of challenge that was the clunky part to this is the disconnect between the CTMS, the research database, to the EMR. But I do want to give another shout out, and Joe mentioned just a little while ago our partnership with Biooptronics. Biooptronics, again, has kind of come into this and helping us build some of those bridges in terms of the research data into the EMR.
That's right, because it's still very much a manual system, and on the go forward, it needs to be automatic. Once they're registered as a patient in your CTMS.
CTMS.
Thank you. That needs to be directly known into our systems so that we don't have to manually set up these cohorts for every study, because each study, and we're participating in dozens of studies.
50.
Everyone has to be done individually and tracked. And what confounders are things like, when did they start and when did they leave the study? We have to know those things so that we can understand how to parse the data based on their time while participating. So any type of integration between the CTMS and the electronic medical record, or the CTMS and our claims system, would be a dramatic enhancement to this work.
Thank you for shedding light into the inner workings. That's really helpful and much appreciated, and it will help the audience and also myself replicate what you have successfully done.
So we only have about a minute and a half for one more question.
I have a quick one. Tom Crone from Trial Reach. First of all, congratulations. Great stuff. I've been looking forward to this. It seems that so often we look at innovation as how to disrupt the norms, change the norms, and bring technology and such. And yet this one, with significant impact, looks like you just looked at the problem differently with the same set of people and processes, but you looked at it differently. Could you speak to, did you use the same processes and such, or how much did you actually change the way you did the work versus you just approached the work differently?
Okay. So one of my mentors used to use a phrase, sometimes you hit a triple, sometimes you wake up on third. To this point, it's wake up on third. We started the ACO, we were doing clinical research. Then we married the two and recognized there's a tremendous benefit. Now we are actively engaging in process transformation on how do we inform the doctors of the benefits of clinical research, how do we notify the patients, how do we actually target studies that marry up with our ACO needs, and the critical pressing question is how do we transition the patients from clinical research and the very valuable benefits that they receive from that aspect of healthcare back into the regular system of healthcare. Because what I worry about is we're going to see a dramatic drop-off in their performance if we do not continue their level of engagement. And that's going to be a challenge for us. And as we had a conversation with CMS a few weeks ago, and that's one of the questions that they asked as next steps in our research, how are you going to sustain it? But at this point, we are heavily engaged in process transformation and ingraining this in as a care option.
Well, help me thank my guest, Jennifer Byrne. What are you waving?
We're allowed to ask a question.
We have more time because we want to ask questions.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
I mean, you had all that time to talk, so. So
All
just,
right. Excellent.
Jules Mitchell, Target Health. Very nice. Just a quick question. When you did the cost savings for those in clinical trials versus before treatment, before involvement, was that across placebo and active, or did it matter? Was it just because they were in a clinical trial, or did the treatment itself within the trial have an impact?
Well, it would be great if you guys would tell me who's on a placebo and who's not.
I think it's really important, you know, that white coat effect and all that stuff.
We believe that there is a white coat effect or a butterfly effect or a halo effect or whatever you want to call it. We can't perfect this information without knowing which patients are on a placebo and which are not.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge for the industry is after the study is over, if you could share that back with us and let us know so that we could advance this research, it would be dramatically helpful.
Yeah, I think that's coming for sure. Thank you.
Great question. Great response.
Jeff Kasher, I've got a question for you guys. This is really cool work. And, you know, we're in a conference talking about disruptions, and, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, tools, APIs, new systems, but the fate of physicians in this country in whether or not they're going to be encouraged or allowed to do clinical research is huge, right? If more are encouraged to do clinical research, it'll make trials easier to do. We'll be able to do trials faster. We'll be able to get medicines to patients faster. If it becomes something that you can't do, then it's going to slow down the whole process. So the data you have is compelling in terms of saying it's good for the accountable care organizations, it's good for sponsors, it's really good for patients. Now, Jeff, as you go to your other conferences where everybody's wearing their nice ties and suits, and you share this with colleagues there, what kind of reception are you getting, and what can we do in this audience to help you expand that message and get it out there faster?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. Thanks. So the one-on-one conversations with my colleagues, everybody's fascinated, and especially when they start to see our research. We only showed a subset of it here. We've got a lot more data that we can show, and we're about ready to run another batch of it. And they're interested. We've already started working with a few other ACOs. Jennifer has started implementing a standard system with another ACO in the Midwest. That ACO happens to be connecting to our analytic systems, so this is kind of cool. We're going to be able to run the analysis for 2 ACOs from one location to do this same research, as well as to develop the populations of patients that could participate in any given study in an integrated cross-country network. And I think that's kind of fascinating work and pretty fun to do. But to answer your question, they don't know how to take it yet, but it's such a compelling story for the ACO. And the reason why is it's the only ACO countermeasure that doesn't cost the ACO money. Yeah. It actually provides an alternative revenue stream rather than adding staff or case managers and all of that. it shows dramatic benefit, dramatic improvement for the ACO in the things that it's trying to do, as well as improves the revenue stream. But the question about how to make this go faster, where are my guys here? And where are your guys with me? Come with me. Get more of my guys here. I promise you, they're looking for collaborations that are different than they used to be.
I'm sure you can get a lot of people in this room to be willing to go to meetings with you. I'd say and so reach out. I mean, you can go through, Kathy to help reach out to people in this room. I think the only caveat is people aren't going to be able to wear ties to your meetings, but other than that, it's good.
Can I add though, let me tell you, this was a huge aha. So this was about a month ago, we had a CRO, very important CRO partner to our relationship, come and meet with us and take a deeper dive. And so we had our medical director sitting at the table, who is an investigator that I would suspect most of you have included at some point in your trials, very experienced, very committed, passionate. And that question came up that you all have asked, what is your sweet spot as far as research? And that physician answered what you would expect to be hypertension, diabetes, obesity, a little bit of, OA. And it was interesting having Jeff at the table, because your response was, what need was there identified?
Yeah, I asked a question, what are we doing for wet macular degeneration? Because, see, in the ACO, that's an extremely expensive treatment option. And so how can we change the direction and marry up research to meet the needs of the patients, yes, but also meet the needs of the partner, which is the ACO. And I think that was a pretty good conversation, really.
So we have time for one more now. I believe now this will be the last time the clock gets reset, so. Oh, last two? Okay.
That's good.
I actually have a follow-on question to Jeff. So when we talk to patients, they tell us that they would be interested in considering a clinical trial if their doctor was conducting it. But when we go back and talk to our pharmaceutical companies, they're not willing to work with a lot of community-based physicians if they haven't gone through the proper GCP training and they haven't been in a trial, and maybe they let them do a phase 4 study but not an IND study. And I'm just curious how you think we can get practicing community-based physicians trained and get through the site feasibility process that pharma puts them through, which I think has become a barrier to even considering doctors for trials.
So that's an interesting question. I'm actually going to answer it probably different than you expect. I think what we need to do in that arena as part of the solution is we need to re-educate the patient, because they don't need their physician participating in the study. They need their physician's organization to participate in the study. And they need a nice handoff, because the physicians in an ACO, it's a care team, right? We do things organizationally. And if the physician, certainly if they want to participate, great. But if not, if they're proactive on the conversation with the patient, and the patient recognizes that it's not Dr. Smith, it's actually Wilmington Health providing your care. And if we change that paradigm in the patient's mind, we'll actually have a lot more success. And certainly these guys can answer how best to train up investigators. That's probably a little bit far afield for me. But I think we need to change the perception of a one-on-one relationship, which is not successful, to an organized system of care approach, and in the mindset of the patient. I think we'll have more success there.
Hi, this is Jeremy Gilbert from Patients Like Me. Love the concept, and I think it's made a lot of sense to do this in diabetes, obviously given the portfolio basis of Lilly and the fact that it's one of the conditions that is kind of easy to calculate from an ACO perspective. So I guess I'm curious, what does it take to extend this into neurologic diseases into inflammation diseases, RA, psoriasis, lupus. What do you guys see as the path to a model like this beyond diabetes?
You're participating in more.
Yeah.
You're participating in many trials besides diabetes today.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, how many are we doing? We're like,
50.
Yeah, so you have
David's-
to be committed to get the data, and you have to be committed to do the comparison to the cohort. And
It's a commitment to doing clinical research,
Research.
right? And we use diabetes because we had some good measurements, cardiovascular, but we're currently participating in multiple other trials.
some of the other ones we've looked at.
We're not sponsoring half of them.
Yeah, we've looked at some of the other ones that we've been able to measure that have COPD,
D.
right? There's a bunch of them. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's defined more by the organization and the capabilities that the organization has. Like currently, we don't have a system around oncology, although we're bringing one up. So we don't have a core competency there. We wouldn't be able to do this model with that. It's just the core competencies, I guess, of the organization.
Great. Thank you.
welcome. So thank you to our guests.
Thank you.